From the moment Kinsleigh entered this world, there were warning signs. But in the shuffle of investigations, reunifications, and struggle, the danger quietly mounted. Kinsley Welty was a 5-year-old girl whose life should have been full of play, laughter, and warmth. Instead, it would end in a state of shocking neglect, locked away in a closet, starved, abused, and alone. Her story begins long before the April 2024 tragedy, stretching back to infancy. For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button. She was born to Mother Toni McClure in a home already under scrutiny by the Indiana Department of Child Services, DCS. As early as 1 month old, records show a report of neglect involving McClure's care of Kinsleigh. That early intervention was meant to safeguard her, but the protective system began its trajectory of return and risk. McClure had prior involvement with DCS and had been convicted of felony child neglect around 2020. But despite this, Kinsleigh and her siblings were repeatedly placed back into her care. According to the lawsuit filed by Kinsleigh's grandfather Brian Welty, DCS closed investigations without adequate follow-up and did not consistently engage with the child face-to-face. One hospital report from August 2021 flagged Kinsleigh and her 2 siblings as being covered in bruises, welts, and appearing underfed. They were removed from McClure's custody, but only temporarily. By December of that year, the children were returned to her care. The reasons why the return happened include DCS's failure to present a medical witness at a fact-finding hearing. Meanwhile, McClure's living situation shifted. She had a boyfriend, Ryan Smith, and McClure's mother, grandmother to Kinsleigh, Tammy Holly, or Halsey in some records, entered the picture. These adults would later be charged alongside McClure. But at this early stage, the system should have seen the red flags. For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button. In late 2023 into early 2024, DCS received multiple reports of neglect and malnourishment concerning Kinsleigh, but closed them as unsubstantiated without face-to-face inspections of the child. For example, one report flagged that Kinsleigh appeared severely underweight, appeared malnourished, and that McClure was not feeding her. That assessment was closed on December 19, 2023. A subsequent report indicated no heat or running water in the home. Again, DCS closed it without seeing Kinsleigh in person. Still, another from January 2024 noted that Kinsleigh's hair was falling out and she wasn't allowed to eat. But DCS again closed the assessment. These systemic failures paint a stark picture. A child in urgent need of care, adults around her aware of trouble, and a state agency failing to intervene. Brian Welty's lawsuit argues that had DCS made the right moves, Kinsleigh could have been placed back with him, where she had spent parts of her young life and where she was loved and safe. Throughout this time, Kinsleigh remained in McClure's custody. According to McClure's later statements to police, Kinsleigh was with her mother until right before her collapse. On April 9, 2024, emergency services were called to a trailer home in Indianapolis and found Kinsleigh unresponsive. The condition of Kinsleigh's body when she arrived at the hospital was horrifying. Doctors noted she appeared severely malnourished, thin, eyes sunken, fecal matter on various parts of her body, including the bottom of her feet and in her hair, and lice crawling on her scalp and face. At age 5, she weighed only 21 pounds, a weight lower than what she had weighed at age 2. As investigators started to piece together what happened in those final months, they found evidence of a makeshift closet prison. Carpeted closet beneath bunk beds, a dresser blocking its door, human waste covering the floor, small handprints marked with fecal matter on the interior of the closet door. And yet, despite all of this, and despite repeated reports, Kinsleigh remained where she was. The systems that should have protected her had repeatedly failed. The stage was set for a tragedy no one stopped. For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button. What happened inside that trailer home in those final weeks? What did the adults around Kinsleigh know? And what are the criminal charges now being brought? Once Kinsleigh was found unresponsive and rushed to the hospital, the scope of her suffering became immediately clear. Doctors and nurses described the scene as horrific and unprecedented in modern pediatric care. She was so malnourished that her organs were compromised. Her skin showed signs of prolonged exposure to filth, and lice infestations were rampant. Emergency personnel called the police, and the case quickly transitioned from a medical emergency to a criminal investigation. Kinsleigh was placed on life support at Riley Hospital for Children, but the damage was irreversible. She passed away on April 9, 2024. The death certificate listed homicide due to abuse and neglect as the cause of death. The initial investigation focused on who was responsible for her death. McClure, Kinsleigh's mother, was immediately considered the primary suspect. However, authorities also looked at McClure's household. Her mother, Kinsleigh's grandmother, her boyfriend, and anyone else who had access to the child. Surveillance, phone records, and social media posts were all analyzed for signs of knowledge, complicity, or intent. Ryan Smith, McClure's boyfriend, came under scrutiny for being present in the home during critical periods. Court filings revealed he had lived in the same trailer and knew of Kinsleigh's condition, according to investigators. Additionally, Tammy Holly, McClure's mother, had been seen in photos and videos with Kinsleigh during the weeks leading up to her death, in the same environment that emergency workers described as a prison for the child. Investigators discovered that Kinsleigh had been locked in a carpeted closet in the trailer, blocked by a dresser, for extended periods. The closet contained human waste, small scraps of food, and signs that the child had tried to escape or signal distress. The placement and condition of the closet suggested deliberate confinement and neglect. Officers documented small handprints covered in feces along the door, a chilling signature of her suffering. Interviews with neighbors, family members, and school personnel revealed more concerning patterns. Kinsleigh had not attended school regularly. Teachers had previously attempted home visits but were blocked or delayed by McClure. Social workers' reports indicated multiple occasions when Kinsleigh was visibly underweight, but no follow-up was enforced. Each report that went uninvestigated became a critical piece of the puzzle, highlighting systemic failures. The legal implications for DCS became a central point in the investigation. Brian Welty, Kinsleigh's grandfather, had long warned the agency that returning her to McClure's care was dangerous. In court filings, he emphasized that the child had been safe in his custody before the repeated placements with McClure. According to these filings, DCS's lack of oversight directly contributed to the circumstances that led to her death. Medical examiners conducted a thorough post-mortem examination. The report detailed extreme malnourishment, untreated injuries, and chronic neglect indicators, weighing only 21 pounds at age 5, significantly below normal developmental benchmarks. Signs of untreated infections and persistent skin irritation. Hair loss and lice infestation indicative of prolonged poor hygiene. Multiple minor bruises consistent with repeated physical abuse. The combination of these factors painted a clear picture. Kinsleigh's suffering was deliberate and sustained over weeks, if not months. Authorities now had to determine which adults in her environment were complicit in or directly responsible for this abuse. McClure's statements to law enforcement during early interviews were inconsistent. She initially denied confining Kinsleigh or neglecting her basic needs. Later, she admitted to placing Kinsleigh in the closet at times as punishment, acknowledging she restricted food access on multiple occasions. Her explanations were vague, contradictory, and insufficient to justify the child's condition. Investigators also focused on Holly's role. Prosecutors later alleged that Holly not only knew about Kinsleigh's condition but actively participated in the confinement and abuse. Evidence included messages between McClure and Holly discussing the child's care, or lack thereof, and witness testimony placing Holly at the trailer during the child's confinement. The digital trail became crucial. Social media activity, timestamps, and photos revealed instances where Kinsleigh was reportedly visible, frail, and distressed, yet no intervention occurred. Posts from the household, though limited, corroborated witness accounts and helped establish timelines leading up to her death. As investigators pieced together the timeline, the focus sharpened on the final 48 hours of Kinsleigh's life. Emergency calls indicated she had been in extreme distress, crying and vomiting, before her collapse. Neighbors reportedly heard unusual activity, but no one realized the severity until emergency responders arrived. The evidence compiled by detectives led to a multi-pronged case strategy, establishing McClure's culpability through witness testimony, digital records, and medical evidence, proving Holly's participation or acquiescence, showing that the grandmother was aware and complicit, evaluating Ryan Smith's knowledge of the abuse and whether he played any role in facilitating confinement or neglect, highlighting systemic failures in DCS, showing repeated reports and warnings went unheeded. By the time arrests were being planned, authorities had amassed substantial evidence. Interviews, photographs, police reports, and medical records pointed to a coordinated understanding of the child's neglect between adults in the home. The scope of the abuse was broader than initially assumed. Throughout the investigation, the community reacted with shock. Fundraisers, vigil postings, and advocacy for reform in Indiana's child services began circulating online. Many asked the same question. How could multiple agencies, neighbors, and professionals overlook the warning signs for so long? Investigators knew arrests were imminent, but the potential for legal maneuvering and public backlash loomed large. McClure and Holly had histories in the legal system, and Smith could mount a defense citing ignorance or lack of direct involvement. The prosecution needed airtight evidence to withstand inevitable challenges in court. Who would ultimately be held responsible for Kinsleigh's death? Would the court see it as the result of one adult's failure, a combination of household complicity, or systemic negligence? For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button. The events of April 2024 left Indianapolis reeling. In the aftermath of Kinsley Welty's death, law enforcement and prosecutors scrambled to piece together exactly what had transpired inside that trailer home. The horror that hospital personnel reported, the emaciated 5-year-old, covered in lice and feces, her tiny body barely recognizable as a child, prompted an immediate criminal investigation. Authorities moved quickly, focusing on those closest to Kinsleigh. Toni McClure, Kinsleigh's mother, became the central figure in the inquiry. Officers learned that she had previously faced felony convictions for child neglect, and her children had been repeatedly returned to her care despite DCS involvement. Witness statements, combined with hospital reports, painted a picture of prolonged neglect and abuse. On April 10, 2024, law enforcement took McClure into custody. During interviews at the police station, she waived her Miranda rights and began recounting events leading up to her daughter's death. McClure claimed that Kinsleigh had spent weeks with her biological father, Bradley Welty, while she dealt with other obligations, including the care of an infant child with her boyfriend, Ryan Smith. Initially, she asserted that she had no knowledge of Kinsleigh's condition during that time. However, investigators soon identified inconsistencies in her story. McClure's narrative conflicted with statements from other family members. Her mother, Tammy Holly, and her great-aunt provided a different account, claiming Kinsleigh had suffered an accidental injury in the bathtub. Both insisted that Bradley Welty had no involvement and that Kinsleigh had been primarily under the care of McClure's boyfriend, Ryan Smith. Interviews with Smith further complicated the case. Smith admitted that he had observed Kinsleigh in the closet but had not sought medical attention, citing his loyalty to McClure. The focus soon shifted to the trailer itself. Crime scene technicians documented the living conditions in meticulous detail. A carpeted closet in the back bedroom, blocked by a dresser, contained human waste and what appeared to be small handprints smeared with fecal matter. Investigators believed that Kinsleigh had been confined there for months. In the same bedroom, bunk beds indicated where other children slept, revealing a stark contrast between their treatment and Kinsleigh's isolation. Autopsy findings confirmed the devastating reality. At 5 years old, Kinsleigh weighed only 21 pounds. Her body showed severe signs of malnutrition, skin infections, lice infestation, and untreated injuries. The medical examiner's report also noted bruises around her face and abdomen. These findings, combined with statements from her siblings, one of whom described Kinsleigh being hit when she was on timeout in the closet, helped investigators build a compelling picture of sustained abuse. With McClure in custody, authorities also arrested Ryan Smith and Tammy Holly. Smith faced multiple charges, including neglect of a dependent resulting in death and criminal confinement. Holly, Kinsleigh's grandmother, was charged with several counts of neglect and failure to report abuse. At the time of the arrests, prosecutors emphasized that all three individuals allegedly played roles in the prolonged suffering of the child. Even as the criminal case unfolded, civil action was brewing. Kinsleigh's paternal grandfather, Brian Welty, filed a lawsuit against the Indiana Department of Child Services, DCS, and multiple employees. The suit alleged repeated failures to intervene, despite years of documented abuse and neglect. According to the complaint, Kinsleigh had been removed from her mother's care multiple times, sometimes staying with her grandfather, yet DCS returned her to McClure despite clear evidence of ongoing risk. For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button. The lawsuit detailed a troubling pattern of administrative lapses. Case workers allegedly closed multiple reports as unsubstantiated without ever making face-to-face contact with Kinsleigh. One report noted that Kinsleigh appeared malnourished, with hair falling out, while another mentioned a home without heat or running water. Each report, filed in late 2023 and early 2024, was allegedly expedited and dismissed without meaningful investigation, a point central to the grandfather's claims of negligence and civil rights violations. Experts analyzing the case have noted the systemic strain on DCS. Indiana case workers reportedly managed far more cases than recommended by national standards, with some workers overseeing as many as 35 children at once. Internal policies, intended to reduce caseloads, may have inadvertently contributed to the failures that allowed Kinsleigh to remain in harm's way. Despite these layers of bureaucracy, the human toll was unmistakable. Every detail revealed in court filings, from the condition of Kinsleigh's body to the conflicting accounts of family members, underscored a pattern of neglect and intentional disregard. Law enforcement and prosecutors emphasized the importance of Kinsleigh's siblings' testimony, photographs from the scene, and McClure's own statements, all of which formed the core of the pre-trial investigation. While the arrests marked a pivotal moment in the case, the story was far from over. McClure, Smith, and Holly awaited trial dates, and civil proceedings against DCS were beginning to shed light on systemic failures. Questions about accountability, both criminal and institutional, loomed large. How much could the DCS have done differently? Could Kinsleigh's death have been prevented if the system had acted more decisively? These questions would continue to haunt prosecutors, investigators, and the public alike. As investigators wrapped up their initial work, the focus turned to the upcoming court proceedings. Pre-trial hearings were being scheduled, and attorneys for all parties were preparing motions, including potential challenges to evidence and procedural claims. The tension between criminal accountability and institutional responsibility set the stage for a legal battle that promised to be as complex as it was tragic. In the meantime, public attention remained riveted on the case. Media coverage highlighted the grim details of Kinsleigh's life and the alleged lapses by DCS. Advocates for child welfare called for reforms, citing the tragedy as a stark example of what can happen when oversight fails. Meanwhile, Kinsleigh's grandfather continued to speak publicly about his grief and determination to hold both the family members and the state accountable. With the arrests complete and lawsuits filed, could the legal system finally deliver justice for Kinsleigh? Or would procedural delays and institutional defenses obscure the truth of what happened? As trials approached, every detail of her short life would be scrutinized, and every failure along the way examined, leaving the world waiting for answers. By mid-2024, the Kinsley Welty case had transformed from a local tragedy into a focal point for national discussions on child welfare, systemic accountability, and the limits of parental responsibility. Even without trials having occurred, the public and media closely followed every development. Arrests, court filings, and civil lawsuits, while policymakers faced mounting pressure to act. Pre-trial motions were filed promptly. Attorneys for Tony McClure, Ryan Smith, and Tammy Holly sought to challenge the admissibility of certain evidence, including photographs from the crime scene and hospital reports documenting Kinsleigh's injuries. The defense argued that some records were obtained without proper procedural safeguards, while prosecutors maintained that every piece of evidence was crucial for demonstrating the prolonged neglect that had contributed to Kinsleigh's death. Meanwhile, Kinsleigh's paternal grandfather, Brian Welty, continued to push his civil suit against the Indiana Department of Child Services. Court filings indicated that the lawsuit alleged repeated failures by DCS caseworkers to act despite clear indicators of abuse. According to the filings, multiple reports from teachers, neighbors, and extended family members went uninvestigated. The lawsuit described instances where Kinsleigh's malnourishment and injuries were documented but not addressed by caseworkers, suggesting systemic negligence over several years. Public reaction intensified as more details became available. Child welfare advocates emphasized that Kinsleigh's death was not an isolated incident, but part of a larger pattern in which overworked and underfunded agencies failed to protect vulnerable children. In news interviews, experts highlighted how Indiana's caseloads often exceeded national recommendations, limiting caseworkers' ability to conduct thorough investigations. Social media amplified these concerns, with citizens calling for accountability not only for the family members involved, but also for the state agencies tasked with oversight. For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button. For those closest to Kinsleigh, the legal limbo was agonizing. Her siblings, still adjusting to life under the care of relatives, were called upon to provide statements for pretrial proceedings. While attorneys worked to shield them from direct court appearances, the emotional toll was evident. Statements filed with the court captured their recollections of isolation, fear, and the physical neglect of their sister, though filtered through legal procedures designed to protect their identities and well-being. As the pretrial process unfolded, investigators revisited details of Kinsleigh's time in the trailer. Evidence logs confirmed the cramped living conditions, the blocked closet, and the lack of access to basic hygiene or nutrition. Forensic reports detailed skin infections, lice infestations, and signs of malnutrition, findings that prosecutors emphasized would form the backbone of their case once trial began. Experts in child welfare and pediatric medicine were also consulted, providing detailed assessments of Kinsleigh's condition and confirming that her injuries and emaciation were consistent with prolonged neglect and confinement. At the same time, the defense teams prepared strategies that largely focused on mitigating criminal responsibility. In motions filed in late summer, McClure's attorneys questioned whether the state's prior involvement with her family introduced bias or procedural errors that could influence the admissibility of evidence. Smith's counsel raised similar concerns, while Holly's defense emphasized a limited role in day-to-day supervision of Kinsleigh, portraying her actions as insufficiently connected to the child's fatal condition. The interplay between criminal and civil proceedings created a tense legal landscape. While the criminal cases aimed to determine individual responsibility for Kinsleigh's death, the civil lawsuit against DCS sought systemic accountability. Court filings suggested that outcomes in one arena could influence the other, though neither side could predict how juries or judges might respond to the combination of personal culpability and institutional failures. Media coverage highlighted these dual narratives. Local news outlets frequently ran features on the DCS lawsuit, documenting past reports, caseworker interviews, and internal agency communications. National attention framed the story as part of a broader crisis in child protection services, using Kinsleigh's death as a stark example of what can happen when oversight fails repeatedly. Opinion pieces debated whether increased funding, tighter caseload limits, or new policy mandates could prevent tragedies like hers. Despite the attention and the mounting evidence, the case remained unresolved. No trials had taken place, and no verdicts had been issued. For the public, this prolonged period of uncertainty created a sense of unease and frustration. Parents, social workers, and advocates alike were left questioning how justice could be served when the system itself seemed to have faltered at every level. As legal teams prepared for hearings, additional motions and pretrial conferences were scheduled. Subpoenas were issued for experts in child psychology, pediatric nutrition, and social work. Depositions were taken from extended family members, former teachers, and neighbors who had interacted with Kinsleigh and her siblings. Each statement reinforced the timeline of neglect, while also highlighting areas of ambiguity, moments when the child welfare system might have intervened more decisively. Community organizations and advocacy groups also weighed in. Fundraisers, awareness campaigns, and public vigils commemorated Kinsleigh, underscoring the shared grief and outrage over her death. Policymakers in Indianapolis faced increasing pressure to review child welfare protocols, with some proposing legislative changes to prevent similar tragedies. These discussions, while necessary, also revealed the complexity of systemic reform and the limitations of reactive measures in the face of long-standing administrative challenges. In private, investigators and prosecutors acknowledged the difficulty ahead. Building a case that satisfied legal standards while honoring the factual record required meticulous care. Every witness statement, medical record, and procedural document was scrutinized for accuracy, reliability, and potential challenges from defense attorneys. The stakes were high, not only for those accused of criminal neglect but also for the state itself, whose handling of Kinsleigh's case was now under intense scrutiny. With pretrial motions, civil lawsuits, and widespread scrutiny of child protection agencies underway, would the combination of legal strategy, public attention, and investigative diligence ultimately lead to accountability for Kinsley Welty's suffering? Or would the complexity of institutional and familial failures leave the story unresolved for years to come? For now, Kinsleigh's story remains a cautionary tale, a tragic reminder of the consequences of prolonged neglect, and a spotlight on the delicate balance between individual responsibility and systemic oversight. A story still unfolding, with justice yet to be determined. What are your thoughts on this case? Do you believe justice will finally be served, or will the system fail Kinsleigh once more? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd really like to hear what you think. You've been watching True Crime Story Vault, where every story is told with facts, empathy, and respect for those who can no longer speak for themselves. Don't forget to subscribe for more real cases. Until next time, remember, the truth is never buried.